Hello, my name is Mike, and these are my bikes. I got a lot of bikes. They're all kind of crammed in here. You know, I got more bikes than I do room. Space is kind of a problem for me. I got all these bikes crammed in here. I even have bikes in other locations. I have one that stays at my cabin in another part of the state. As I acquire more and more projects and, don't ever really complete them, well, then they accumulate. I have one parked here in my carport. The intruder is intruding on my back porch. I have cars crammed just about everywhere. I got two at the front of my house, and the very front of the yard on the street, I have just enough room for my trailer. I have room for two cars in the carport. I can park one vehicle across the carport, and I can park another vehicle across the garage door. And that's it. I'm out of space. Completely out of space. And so I did what any good, completely irrational person would do when faced with a situation like this. Yeah, I did it again. Have I mentioned before that browsing on Facebook Marketplace is dangerous for me? Well, I couldn't pass it up. I've got a couple of Kawasaki's here I got very, very cheap. I saw an ad, took a little drive down to the Colorado River area to a city called Bullhead City, and picked these two gems up for a very, very low price. These are Kawasaki twins. They are both 440 LTDs. One's a 1980, one's a 1982. And they're two-cylinder inline engines that makes them twins. And since they're both the same model, that makes them twins. So they are twins. I don't know where I'm going to put them. So my first task is going to be, I got to try to get them off of the trailer. So stick around.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona, not far from historic Route 66, is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least two cool wheels.
Now, something I thought is worth mentioning is that, well, this is my 100th video as Two Cool Wheels. Well, that is if you don't count the reboot of Stranger, then it would be 101. But I mean actual new original material for Two Cool Wheels. Well, unless you don't count the stuff I did under my own name before I started this channel. There's about a half a dozen. Never mind. Okay, this is the 100th for this channel. Anyway, let's take a little closer look at these fine vehicles. This one is a 1980 model year, and it's pretty complete. It's got just about everything on it, except, well, the indicator cover for the cluster here and ignition switch seems to be missing some parts here. But we can source that kind of stuff. Chrome isn't really too bad at all. There's a tiny bit of little rusty stuffs. Not too bad. Okay, the engine is fairly complete, it appears. One thing I did notice is there's this kind of weird stuff here on the engine cover. At first I thought somebody tried to patch a crack with JB Weld, but it turns out it's just stuff dripping from the gas tank. Kind of shows you what kind of crud they put in our gas. It ferments over time. Okay, the seat, well, it's the type of vinyl that turns to this hard, brittle stuff, and it's crunchy. The sun here in Arizona is pretty merciless, and plastic and vinyl, those kind of things just don't hold up. They just turn brittle and hard. Okay, it's got 2 individual carburetors. We're very likely going to have to dig into those carburetors to get this thing to run. And it's going to need tires. The tires are absolute junk. And it also has 0 brakes. So we're looking at minimum, if we can get it to run, is tires, brakes, and an ignition switch. Now let's have a look at the other one. This one is an 82, so this one's actually newer, but you sure wouldn't know it to look at it. This one's a little rougher. It has the custom air-cooled seat. You know, you don't want that sticky vinyl sticking to your cheeks when you're driving down the road on a hot day. So this is ventilated. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's pretty crumbly. I did see seat covers available for these. That'll slip right over that for about $30. Problem is, well, there's not a lot of foam left to slip that cover over. I don't know. My wife's got some foam. Maybe I'll try to fix these seats. I know the upholstery shop's going to want more than the bike is worth to reupholster it. That's usually how it goes. The interesting thing about this one is it's belt drive. This one is belt drive. The other one is chain drive. So between 80 and 82 is when they made that changeover. This chain is extremely rusty. I'm kind of surprised it even moved at all. But looking at the chain, it doesn't look terribly worn, and that drive sprocket really doesn't look too bad. It's got a little wear, but it's good for another, 4 miles or so. Anyway, back to this one. This one, well, it's going to be more of a challenge to get this one running because it's missing something pretty important right here. It's missing the intake boot for one of the carburetors. And with that intake boot missing, that means, well, this cylinder has been exposed to the elements, which is pretty much a guarantee that moisture and dirt got inside that cylinder. There's a good chance this one's going to need a little more persuasion. Might be rusty or locked up, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Again, 0 brakes. Again, missing the cluster and the ignition switch, junk tires, and of course, the obligatory leaking front fork seals. So, all in all, they're perfect for what I do. They're junk. So here's the plan. I'm going to start with this one since it's mostly complete. It's got, tail light, turn signals, and, you can even tell it's a Kawasaki still. Whereas this one, it's missing all that stuff. There's no tail light, no turn signals, and it's got that missing boot. So we're just going to ignore this one for now and focus on this one because I think I can make a bike out of this. If I need to borrow some parts off this one, I surely can. So our first step is going to be, we're going to delve into this bike here. We're going to see if there's oil in the crankcase. We're going to see if the engine turns over. I'll rig up a battery to it. We'll see if there's, see if we can put a little starting fluid in it and get it to pop, and you know, kind of go from there. So there's our sight glass, indicate oil level. You can't get a good indication of it until the bike is kind of leaned over. So we're going to see if anything goes into there while it's leaned. Oh, looky there. Got a little dark stuff coming in. Kind of sort of looks like oil. It's a little low, but not terrible. All right. I think what I'll do is I'll pull the fill off. That's right here, and I'll stick something down there so I can get a little sample of it. So these don't have a dipstick like other engines do. So I'll have to kind of fabricate something to probe it and get an idea of what that oil looks like. And if it's good, we'll see if we can put some kind of a battery to it and see if she cranks. A convenient dipstick laying on the ground. Look at that. There's oil there. Let's have a look at that oil. Stay. See what it looks like. Wow, that's actually really clean. Pretty impressed with that. So it appears somebody recently did an oil change on it before it was parked, and it didn't run it too much since then. Doesn't smell like it's full of gas or varnish, so that's a plus. Put this back on. Something rattling, but it doesn't sound like a liquid. Now, let's see here. Airbox covered with dirt. That's not good. Battery goes down under this airbox. Let's see what. Let's take the lid back. What is here? Lovely. That's supposed to be one thing. There's one cable. This appears to be the ground, so this would be the hot. So before I crank this around, no telling how long it sat. I want to shoot just a little WD-40, some kind of lubricant into the cylinders so it's not cranking dry. Well, it looks really good. Something to soak on. Let's see. Let's take that inside. Does this fit? No. Yep. Kinda. Sorta. Almost fits. It's completely the wrong battery, but that's all right. That's never stopped us before. You know, wrong parts are my specialty. If it's wrong, no, I'll make it work. Or not. All right, I got a battery kind of cobbled into place using my handy dandy melted ground wire to ground the engine. And we're going to use a test light to try to figure out what the terminals are here on what was once an ignition switch. And it turns out that it looks like this white wire here is so that's the hot coming from the battery. I got this red one that connects to this red one. So one of these is going to be like ignition on, and the other is going to be lights. I don't know what this one would be. I don't have a schematic for this. I'm going to try to look one up online. But in the meantime, well, I'll just use the trial and error method, and we'll just jumper some stuff here. And if no smoke comes out of anything, well, we'll call it good. All right, I got it all cobbled together, and I have an oil light, and I have a whatever this light is. I'm guessing that might be like a neutral light. And this switch is damaged and it does not crank. This doesn't do anything. Probably got to pull on the clutch. Let me try that. Clutch switch. Let's see a clutch switch. Oh goodness. Alright, where is the starter relay on this thing? It went somewhere. This is not doing a darn thing. This is how this goes. Goes to here. Goes to here. Plugs in here. This one's big harness. I have no idea. All right, there's our starter relay or solenoid, whatever you want to call it. We'll jump across that, see if we can get her to crank. Just use a screwdriver, see what happens. She's got compression. And she's got a good battery. All right, well, let's see if I can make that oil light go off. Oh yeah, oil light went right off. So, at least we primed the oiling system. I'm going to go ahead and charge the battery, put the plugs back in it, and hit it with some starting fluid and see if we can get her to pop. Now, I've had a few Kawasakis of this genre in the past, and evidently the cutoff was someplace around 1980, because my 1981 had electronic ignition, and this 1980 model year has breaker points. So, while we're waiting for the battery to charge, I'm going to go ahead and clean those points up so we get a nice, healthy spark. Well, in theory. Well, there we go. A little rattly. All right, so we know it's possible to make this a running motorcycle again. So I'm going to stop here for the day and order the correct battery for it, because that one's on its last legs. It just barely holds a charge. And, I'll see what else I can come up with. An ignition switch and what do you call it? An emergency kill switch. That one wasn't really working too good. And I'll turn on the brakes, see what parts I need for that. And we'll get some stuff ordered up and see if we can't get it where it starts and runs on its own. I'm going to yank the carburetors off, clean them out. And I don't know about the tank yet. I have to try and get that gas cap off. I don't have a key to anything. I do know that there are some sites online where you can get brand new keys and matching gas cap for some of the older bikes. So hopefully I can find that for this one here. So that's our next step. Oh, hi. So you might wonder what I'm doing. Well, what I've done is I put a bunch of small screws in the gas tank to try and loosen up some of the crusty crud that's all over the inside. I removed the fuel valve, just taped it off. I've just used a handful of really small, short screws. Now, some people will tell you can put rocks in there, which you can, or bolts or something like that. I like to use small screws because they can get into little corners and etch the, crud out of the difficult to access places. And then when it comes time to remove them, well, unlike rocks, you can use a magnet to get all those screws out of there. Now, I'm observing that it's quite possible this tank has a fuel leak. There's some indications of that. I won't know until I put fuel in it. But I'm going to go ahead and, do the castanet thing. Try to get as much crud out of there as I can. Put the fuel valve back in it. Put some fuel in it. And just, go from there. And then hopefully I can get it to run off those carbs. I haven't pulled the carbs off or apart yet. Just want to see how bad they are. I'm not kidding myself. I'm going to have to take them apart. Pretty sure. But you never know. I've actually had motorcycles that sat for a decade, and because the previous owner had a little bit of foresight, he drained all the fuel out of those carburetors, and I was able to put a little Berryman's and a little bit of fresh fuel in them and get them to actually run and work properly. It doesn't happen very often, so certainly not holding my breath. Anyway, let me finish this up. We'll put the gas tank on it, put the fuel valve back in place, hook up a hose, and we'll see what happens. All the crusty stuff. The rusty and crusty does not combusty so well. The rusty and crusty don't combusty so well. Getting them. That's mostly rust. Then I'll flush it. I'll flush it with water afterwards. It'll push most of that stuff out. It's nasty. A lot of times you can see the debris kind of come flowing out. Not seeing a whole lot, but I know what's in there. And then I run a heat gun in it for, 15 minutes or so, just to evaporate as much water out of the tank as I possibly can after draining it. Because there's always going to be a little bit of moisture in there that doesn't quite make it to that opening for the valve. So we'll get her dried out as best we can, put the valve in it, put it back on the bike, and see what happens.
And the fuel valve screen looks pretty good. It's only got, you know, a little bit of rusty stuff.
Well, that's a miracle. So while I was waiting for my tank to dry, cleaned out the master cylinder reservoir on the brakes and attempted to bleed it, and lo and behold, it actually bleeds. I actually have front brakes. Whew. Fluid's ugly though. Need some fresh fluid, but one miracle at a time. So I've re-rigged up my wrong battery, hooked up my remote start switch, got fuel in the tank, and surprisingly there's no fuel leaks. That'll be interesting to see if it actually starts. Alright, connect my ground, see if we can get it to start on the carburetor. Get some starting here. Houston? Not a problem. Yeah, just a little leakage there. Okay. I knew that was going to happen. Should have bet money on it. Well, there it is, guys. I've really gone as far as I can go without the proper battery, and I'm going to have to pull those carbs apart. There's little O-ring seals there on the fuel feed tube that are leaking just profusely. They're dry rotted. Oddly enough, the tires hold there. So come on back for the next episode. By then I'll have the correct battery so I can, put the battery in it. I'll have fixed the carburetors, and we should be able to take it for a spin. And then I'm going to repeat all this madness on the other bike. Got a boot ordered and a battery, so come on back.